Hi guys, we're here to teach you how to do plotting for your story. It might even pertain to, well, it does pertain to novels and short stories. Short stories, you have to hurry it along, get as much information in there as possible without adding too much information, but that's another thing. So, you know, Isaac, remember in school when they taught you the 5-paragraph essay?
Mm-hmm.
They had the introduction with the thesis statement. Do you remember that?
No.
Well, the introduction paragraph.
No.
And then you have the body, the
No.
3 paragraphs, and then the conclusion of your 5-paragraph essay. You don't remember?
No.
Well, that's good because we're not going to learn that today. Forget it. We're doing plotting. This is different, and I'm sure you haven't learned it yet. So, when you're plotting out your story, you also have an introduction, but we also have rising action. You know what that is?
No.
Well, that's where like things start getting intense.
Like
things happen to your character, you know, like that make them not able to accomplish the goal that they need to achieve. Like save the damsel in distress. You know, like in saving the
Superman.
princess in the castle.
Mm-hmm.
No princesses. Okay, so and then they work themselves up to the climax. That's where everything's at stake. They come to the final conclusion. Are they going to finally achieve that goal?
And then they all die.
Well, that would really be a drag. They all
What?
died.
Like your adult video, you said the leader's like a good ending, like that the hero saved the day and stuff like that.
Well, they can't all die.
Well, I mean, I'm just doing the first thing I said was the bad person, and then the good person I just said.
Okay. All right, so after the climax, you have following action, where you tie up all the loose ends, like you answer questions that you pose through the story, and the resolution. So we'll go through each one of these. The introduction, rising action, climax, which is also the middle, the climax, and the falling action, and the resolution. In a lot of these diagrams, you see all this, and then you just see a peak and a drop. But really, what should happen is like your character almost gets his goal, but then something happens and he doesn't do it. So he comes up against a barrier, so he drops again. But then he finally achieves the goal. Okay, so that's the best kind of writing. So, sorry. Okay, so plotting. The first part is the introduction with your hook. You know what the hook is?
Fishing?
No. Not fishing. In story writing, the hook is what grabs the reader's attention. So, you have to have the hook right away when you write a story, otherwise you bore the reader to death. And a lot of times, you can do that by how? How do you think you can create a hook in your story?
The guy gets stabbed, they're almost dead, and then he comes back alive somehow and nobody really cares.
That's actually a great way to do it. You start off with action right at the first.
Yes.
Or sometimes just dialogue can do it. Do you know what the difference is between dialogue and narration?
No, but I know a narrator is like a person that tells the story.
Correct. Narration is the part of the story where nobody's talking, but you're just telling what's happening. Dialogue is when you have quotations around them, where your characters are talking. That's dialogue. Talking, yeah. And sometimes you have inner dialogue. Do you know what inner dialogue is?
No. You think in your mind?
Yes.
Oh,
That's
okay.
right.
Yes, I
Inner
do.
dialogue. So sometimes people write out what someone's thinking in their mind, what one of their characters are thinking in their mind. So, in the introduction, we need the hook, which grabs the reader's attention, and you can do that by starting off with action, like you said, or just having your characters talk to each other. That's interesting. When you write a story, you need a lot of dialogue. A whole bunch of narration is boring. Just telling the story. That can be boring.
And people will get a lot of Z's.
Yes. Well, they'll sleep a lot, yes. And so, also in your introduction, along with your hook, you should have information about the setting of your story, like where it's taking place. You know what the setting is, right? No. You know what the setting of the story is?
The background.
Yeah, like are they inside a building, their house? Are they in the desert or next to a river? So you have to describe what's going on. And you know what the plot is?
Like how the plot of the story.
Mm-hmm. What is it?
Like the story plot, like the story, how it like begins and ends. And
Yeah, it's what the story's about.
Yes.
So in the introduction, we got to figure out, we have to hook the reader, tell them what the setting is, introduce our characters and the plot. That is, what is the main goal of our characters? What do they want to accomplish?
First, we have to make a story to say that.
That's the plot, yes. So we have to let the reader know what your character is really after. What is their biggest problem that they have to solve? You see? So, that's the first part of your story.
Oh boy, there are more pages.
Yes, there's more pages. So, so when you're introducing all this stuff, sometimes people write it out like a boring list in their narration, the telling part of the story. And that can be kind of boring, so we try to introduce this sneakily, the plot and the setting. We sneak it in. Well, like we can just introduce little parts of it at a time.
How do you do that?
Just small parts of it at a time.
Oh,
Like
the
while-
book I'm reading.
Yeah, exactly. You learn more and more as you go along, but you need the most important information at first, and then you add more as you go along.
Don't let your kid read that book. It's boring.
All right.
Don't hit my face again.
Like we were talking about, the hook is in unanswered questions. You put unanswered questions in your reader's head. Like, maybe you introduce a character that has a limp. And the reader is going to be like, why is Sandra limping like that? But you don't tell them. Maybe that's the biggest thing in the whole story. You answer that question later on. So the whole time, the reader might be going, why is she limping, right? Okay, and so the hook, like we said, can also start off with action and or dialogue. So that's the hook. All right, so now, the middle part of your story. This is where we start developing the characters. Do you know what I mean by that? Developing your characters is where you tell the reader more about what your characters are like. Maybe they have an accent, like they're from Texas or something. They have an accent from there, or an English accent from like England. And this is also where you give your characters problems. They need a lot of problems to solve. If they just go through life and nothing bad ever happens,
That would be awesome.
well, in normal life maybe, but in books that's boring. So you need to give your characters problems. So maybe like your character is in love with her boyfriend, but her parents never let her go to lunch with him or anywhere with him.
Or like, your father got in prison, and you have to...
That's a
Hey,
pretty serious one.
I saw a book. I read
Oh.
a book in my school, and she was an Afghan child, and something like that.
Oh.
And the Afghan soldiers, they took him to jail because he was smart, and they don't really like smart people because he went to school in Italy. And he came back, and the daughter is struggling because she can't get out of her house because she's a woman.
That's pretty good. Wow.
So she has to be just like a boy and everything.
Okay, so that's obstacles. She had all kinds of problems to overcome, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. That's a good part of the book. So you do all that through the whole middle. You give them problems, 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 and you show us what your characters are like. But all the while, they're getting closer to fixing the main problem, like your character trying to help her dad get out of jail. The climax. Remember the part of the diagram we had that was at the top?
Yes.
Well, it was at the very top. Let's see where we're...
Oh,
Okay.
boy. Oh,
This
okay.
one right here. The climax, right here. This little V.
Okay.
Right here? Okay.
Well, back
So,
up.
this is where the character faces their main problem.
You're cleaning that up. Okay, anyway.
This is where they finally get to the place where they're facing their main problem. But, like that V shows, they almost don't make it.
Oh, boy.
That is where you have your reader just so involved in your book, they can't put it down.
I have a question, Mom.
What?
Have you ever read a book that the character died by chance?
The main character dies?
And then a new guy comes and then they're like, why did you take away that guy? And then not the whole thing, and then they just delete it anyway. They say they don't do it.
I think I have, but I can't think of what the name of it was right now. And I think it was a classic novel of some sort. Oh, yes. But you may not.
Oh, man.
Okay, so, also, this is where your character changes in some way for the better, or they realize what their problem was, and they learn how to change themselves to overcome the problem. Okay?
Let's get this in the class.
Okay, this is it. The wrap-up.
Oh my goodness, it's almost over.
To end your story, there's usually two kinds of endings.
Yes.
First, we have a rise to climax. That's where your character is constantly overcoming problems, and they finally get to the end and they
Fail.
overcome the main problem. That's usually what action-adventure movies are like, or books.
Like Spider-Man.
Yeah, exactly. Then there's also the character who returns home. That's where your character realizes their fault. They find himself. They have an epiphany, and they learn a lesson. Those are quest adventures.
Well, kind of like I saw this video game. I know. Hear me out.
I know video games have writing. Someone wrote the stories for your video games. Writer is very important. I'm glad you brought that up. Anyway, go ahead.
What do you call it? You're not gonna like the zombie. And the girl and the boy called The Last of Us. You kids out there, you may know it. Yeah. And then it top 10 game. And what do you call it? The girl, spoilers, and the girl, she is immune to the zombie thing. And her her friend and her, she got bit, they both got bit, and they're like, okay, we're gonna die together. But she didn't die because she's immune, so she feels terrible. Like you said, she's realizing fault.
Oh.
And what do you call it? She finally made it to the end. The guy that we're talking about, if I did, I forgot. And what do you call it? She in surgery. She's about to get. The people want the immune thing she has inside of her, and she then cure everybody. But the guy didn't want her to because it's kind of like her. I forgot.
Anyway, that's your
Yeah,
quest.
yeah. Yeah, I don't take you out, but okay.
Okay, so those are the two kinds of endings.
Yeah.
You rise up to climax, and then once the main problem's fixed, the story's over. Or they realize their problem, learn a lesson, they return home a new person. That's the second kind.
Yes. That's
The
what I was
end.
gonna go to, but okay.
All right, so that's how you do plot